This webinar is about student teams. Keep your student teams on track. I am Christina Peterson, and also with us here today are James Andre and Mary Jetter. We are all from the Center for Educational Innovation. James is managing technical aspects of this webinar, and Mary will be monitoring the chat. Once again, thank you for joining us on this early Monday morning. Today, for the next hour, I'm going to talk about how to keep your student teams on track. And we are going to begin with a poll. For this poll activity, it's just a very short answer to two questions. Thinking about teams that you have used in your teaching, and if you have not taught, think about teams that you've participated in as a member. What are the advantages of using team assignments in your teaching? And what are the challenges of using team assignments in your teaching? I'd really like to hear from all of you before we start to see what your experience has been with teams. The poll is open. It should have popped up above the screen where we're presenting. Answer each question and be sure to select submit. If you have any problems with this poll, let us know in the chat. And we're going to take about 2 to 3 minutes to let you enter your words into the poll. I'll give you a 1-minute warning before closing the poll. So just to remind you, you will find the poll panel, it says polling with a little icon in the upper right-hand side of your screen. So click on that and you will see the two questions. They're just short answer questions. What are the advantages of using student teams in your teaching? And what are the challenges of using student teams in your teaching? Assignments, team assignments. So if you've taught, I'd love to hear about what you've experienced. If you've participated as a student as part of a team assignment, you can provide that. So just a reminder, post your answers in the poll rather than the chat. The polling function is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Click on that and you will see the poll questions. It's a short answer for each one of the questions. And we see that some of you have finished. So again, a reminder to not put your answers in the chat, but to use the polling function, upper right-hand side of the screen. Just click on that. You'll see the two questions and then type in your answers. So let's take 1 more minute and then I'm going to shut the poll down and we'll take a look at your answers. So you have 1 more minute to add your responses. All right, so I'm going to close the poll. And I will tell you what you've said. And thank you everybody who participated. So, advantages of using team assignments. I like them. I like that response. Peer-to-peer learning, teamwork is a skill that needs to be practiced. Delegation, leadership, distribute the workload, communication skills, all correct. We'll talk about that. Students get to know each other. There are multiple perspectives on the assignment. And the students getting to know each other is nice, because, especially in a large class, where students may not have the opportunity to get to know someone. Inter-team discussion allows for a more rich discussion, can present more challenging problems, have students learn co-work. Team assignments replicate the real world. We all know that. So there are very few jobs where you won't work in teams. Designed to generate more variety in solutions and practice in building professional relationships. They're able to utilize different experiences and learner strengths. Faster grading, I'm glad somebody put that down. If you have teams, you have less assignments submitted if they're team assignments. Deeper learning, that's another great answer. All right, what about challenging? Student social loafing, that is a big complaint from students. Some may feel left out. Slackers, finding time for students to meet. We have heard all of these before. There can be free riders. May take more time initially. Yeah, that's true. It does take more time initially, at least until students get used to their group. Arguments may occur depending on the topic. May need to split up groups if a group isn't working well together. We won't spend a lot of time talking about that, but I'm going to give you a link to a resource that does talk about that. Team dynamic issues. Some students will be unhappy with their team members if they're not contributing. Not easy to grade, and we will talk about assessing teams at the end of this presentation. Okay, so thank you everybody for submitting these responses. What I have on this slide are a list of advantages of teamwork. And this is from an article. The citation is at the bottom, Turning Student Groups into Effective Teams. By the way, if you only read one article, this would be the one I would recommend. So based on pedagogical research, some of the benefits that have been found for small group learning compared to traditionally taught courses: students achieve higher grades, they learn at a deeper level, they retain information longer, they are less likely to drop out of school, they acquire greater communication and teamwork skills, they gain a better understanding of the environment in which they will be working as professionals. So that all sounds great. Why isn't everybody using teams? Well, these benefits are not automatic. So today we're going to talk about some actions you can take to ensure that your team projects are successful so that your students will have these benefits. So questions we'll address today: how do I design an effective teamwork project? How do I support student teams to ensure their success? And how do I assess team projects? So let's move ahead and talk about how do I design an effective teamwork project. An effective project, an effective teamwork project, includes an authentic task that requires both collaboration and distinct individual contributions. So what do I mean by an authentic task? Well, before I tell you that, I just want to remind you again that we have a workbook that might help you take notes as we go along. And that workbook is at z.umn.edu/student-teams-workbook. So just a reminder, if you haven't done so already, to download the workbook. All right, so authentic tasks. Authentic tasks are those that a professional in your field might do. So what does a professional in your field do? Additionally, an effective team assignment requires a problem complex enough to benefit from multiple perspectives. So when I think about this, if I'm thinking about possible team projects, I ask myself, could a single student do this project by themselves? And if the answer is yes, it's probably not a complex enough project. So you might want to think, if you think a student could do your project by themselves, you might want to think of a more collaborative or complex project. So what I'm going to do next is briefly describe 3 team projects that have been effectively utilized by faculty here at the University of Minnesota in Twin Cities campus, just to give you an idea of the variety of different topics and assignments you can use, and some of the details of how these instructors made them work. The first one I'm going to talk about is an introductory biology team project. This was actually written up in the journal Science, and this was a project for an introductory biology course. So not an advanced biology course, introductory. Students were asked to devise a genetic solution to a societal problem of their choice. They worked in teams of 9 and chose a societal problem of interest, and then used genetics to devise a possible solution to the problem. They didn't actually conduct the experiments, they just proposed the experiments. At the end of the semester, teams presented their solution in a poster at a class poster session. The next project is an international business management team project. For this project, students were tasked with creating and delivering training for conducting international business. Teams of 4 to 5 chose a country of interest, and they began researching that country, looking at cultural considerations that need to be taken into account for doing business in that country. Teams presented their findings at the end of the semester in mock training sessions. And the third project that I will describe is a community partners project. This was in a web usability course in writing studies. And with this project, teams of 4 worked with a community partner that would not ordinarily engage professional usability services. So perhaps a nonprofit or a community partner that couldn't afford to engage usability services. Students collected data, assessed the usability of the site, and made recommendations to the organization. And they were graded on a final written report. So that was 3 possible projects. I want to direct you to a website resource that we created at the Center for Educational Innovation, Faculty Guide to Teamwork.umn.edu, and I will be referring to this a few times throughout this presentation. At this website, Faculty Guide to Teamwork.umn.edu, we have a lot more information about effective team projects. So what you see here is just one resource on that website, and this outlines 5 different team projects and gives the details of those projects. 3 of those projects we've already talked about, 2 are new ones. So you can get more details and more ideas about projects if you go to this website. All right, so now that we have these ideas of team projects, I'd like you all to think of a project for your discipline. As you think about this project, ask yourself, is it authentic and is it complex enough to benefit from a team working on it? In other words, it's so complex an individual couldn't do it on their own. And if you want, you can start jotting your ideas down in your workbook. This will be a talking activity. So if you're willing to share on the microphone with everybody here, and you're ready to talk, raise your hand, and I will recognize you by name and ask you to unmute your microphone and we'll hear about your projects. So it doesn't have to be a new project. Maybe it's a project you have used successfully in your teaching. That would be great to hear about. Maybe it was a great project you participated in as a student. That would be great to hear about. So we'll just take a couple minutes to think about this. And when you're ready to share, raise your hand. I know it's early on a Monday morning, like early to share, but we can't see you. So we have Blaine Brownell has raised their hand. Blaine, do you want to unmute your microphone and share with us the project you were thinking about? So just click on the microphone, that red slash to the right of your name, and that will unmute you. I see you're still on mute.
Having technical trouble.
Okay. Looks like Blaine is having technical trouble. Okay.
Amy Crimson just raised her hand.
All right. Let's hear from Amy Krensman, and then we can come back to Blaine. Hopefully his technical troubles are fixed. Amy, if you could unmute your microphone and share with us. So Amy, your microphone is still muted. To unmute, just click on it. Are people having problems with the unmuting? Let us know. We'll try and help. All right. I'm not hearing from Amy. How about we go back to Blaine? Blaine, are you able to unmute and join the chat?
How about you unmute them? If they're having difficulty, you unmute.
Okay. So what I'm going to try to do is I will unmute you and see if that allows you to talk. So once again, we're going to Blaine. Blaine, I'm going to unmute you. I just did.
That worked.
Ah, perfect. Thank you for your patience, Blaine.
Yeah, thank you. I kept trying to click on it, but nothing. So thank you. Just briefly, so I teach architecture, and I've taught team projects a lot in the past, but never really, well, I guess I just have been winging it, essentially, or learning from colleagues about what makes an effective team project. Typically, I mean, a lot of the projects that we teach are complex in nature, and so having a team assists more in the development. Students can go deeper, we feel, and they can produce more when they work as teams, or I should say effective teams especially. I like this idea of problems needing to be complex enough to necessitate or to benefit from multiple perspectives, to have a team. Our mindset in architecture is typically more focused on the productivity and the depth that a student, that a collaborative team can generate, as opposed to the idea that the problem has to be complex enough to necessitate a team. So it's a different mindset, and I'm just curious. Yeah, I guess I'm curious how it makes me think that perhaps we should structure our projects more methodically around this idea of what can collaboration generate that a single perspective cannot.
Yeah. So what kind of projects would you have? Would students be designing something or responding to a design, or what form would that take?
It really could be any form. let's say that there's a large housing project in China somewhere, and we have a studio that's focused on an international setting to get students to put them in a place where they, especially students who haven't traveled to a country like that, are less comfortable or less knowledgeable about a setting. So they have to learn a lot about a different culture, different professional approaches to design, and perhaps the scale of the project is such that a single individual would not be able to generate the necessary work in terms of just the scope of the project would be too big for any one person to generate.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I'm going to put you on mute now. And now I'm going to Amy, and I will take you off mute. You should be off mute now. Are you there, Amy?
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Oh, that's great. So my activity is for a class where I have the students work in teams of 3 or 4 in the first hour of class to present material based on the reading for that week. So when it goes poorly, I think students basically like the activity. They work together. They usually each take 1 or 2 of the readings, and they each present them, and they have to bring it together as a cohesive. They kind of lecture for the first hour of class. And when it goes well, I encourage them, I urge them to go beyond the reading and do some independent research and dig a little deeper so that what they present to the class isn't stuff that everyone in the room has already read. It isn't a regurgitation of the reading, because then students complain that it's too redundant. Those who've done the reading, they feel it's too much of a review of what they've just read. But of course, everyone does the reading, and not everyone does all the reading. And in some ways, I feel like repetition is useful to learning. So I just feel it's something that could use some improvement.
What kind of class is this?
This is a substance abuse class in the School of Social Work.
Interesting. So yeah, there could be lots of project ideas there. Okay, thank you for sharing, Amy. I am going to mute you again. And who else would like to share? You can raise your hand. Sarah. Sarah North has her hand raised. I'm going to unmute you, Sarah. Sarah, are you there?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. I am a physical therapist by trade. I actually just arrived. I've been here about 2 weeks, so hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. The institution I came from, I was in instructing a course in the last of a 3-part professional practice sort of professional development series, and I felt like there needed to be more population public health type of content in the course, but I didn't think it very much lended itself to convincing physical therapy students of the importance of population health via lecture. That just didn't seem like a good match. So I had students, I had about 80 students, and I think they were in groups of 6 to 8-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. And at the start of the semester, excuse me, I gave them the option to choose one of the National Healthy People 2020 objectives. There are a ton of national health indicators, things like reducing frequency of diabetes and like really complex problems that no one knows how to solve. And over the course of the semester, they needed to use the Pre-Seed planning model to essentially pick that area of study, look in the community via community health data websites, health ranking roadmaps and things like that to find out in a specific county or area of their choosing the presence of that problem to really make it match. And then they basically had to find programs that were around the country and find something that they could implement in that particular community on a doable scale to try to help, at least in a small part, address that problem.
That is a great project. I mean,
oh, and then at the end of the semester, sorry, it was a huge, I had a huge auditorium, and it was all like conference style posters, and they rotated in sections to walk around and discuss with other student groups and kind of see what other people had tackled and what kind of projects and resources are out there in our communities.
Wow, that is great. I mean, I like that they got to choose the healthy objectives that they were interested in. They got to choose the county that they were going to look at the data, and it sounds very complex that they would need a team to put together that information. And the poster session at the end is a really nice way to showcase all the work they've done. Can I ask you, how did you grade that?
There were a few different parts based on the classic team complaints about people not necessarily doing their particular assigned effort. I did have a very tiny portion of the students being able to grade peers. That was a pretty small portion. Otherwise, it was they also submitted scaffolded semester-long assignments that were written versions that all build up to this presentation, because if I gave them this project at the end, they would have started it 2 weeks before, maybe 2 days before. So it was scaffolded throughout. So those, a big chunk of their course grade was actually those written assignments. So they were graded on the content for my sake as well. As they went, they were able to get feedback that prevented them from going down the wrong track. Excuse me. And then the poster presentation itself, I just made up a little rubric that was regarding the materials they had up, regarding how they were able to engage and answer questions and things like that.
Sarah, there's so much good practice there. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
I'm going to mute you now. Let's take one more question. I'm searching for the James Winship. All right. James Winship, I am unmuting you right now.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning, James.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I didn't see the microphone turn red for me. I teach psychology here at the University of Minnesota in Rochester, and we do a group project in abnormal psychology. And a lot of the ideas I'm going to present, we've all kind of heard before. So we have this research proposal where they identify a disorder they're interested in and talk about a therapy that might be used for that particular disorder.
Okay.
The final project, or the final product at the end, would be a poster and an oral presentation at the end of the semester. Now, I think that some of my students could probably take on this task on their own, but not all of them could. And I think by truncating the time that we give them to do the project sort of engenders their need to sort of work together collaboratively on this final project at the end.
And what kind of feedback do you get from your students about that project?
Could you clarify what you mean feedback? I mean, some people really like it and some people feel burdened by it.
Yep, that's the kind of feedback I meant.
You know, so, but I mean, we tell them, you know, if you're going to be in this field, this is the stuff you have to do. So it's not like we're throwing something at you that you're not going to see time and time again.
Yep. Well, thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
I'm going to mute James, and it was really great hearing all of these projects. Very creative. And the thing is, if you create a project that is interesting to you as the instructor, it will be more fun to grade. So I'm just going to spend a minute or two talking about team configuration. Not a lot of time. I get a lot of questions about what is the best way to put teams together. And that's kind of that could be a whole seminar or webinar in itself. But basically, we recommend that you create teams that are heterogeneous with respect to their knowledge, skills, and perspectives. Because if you have a complex project that requires multiple viewpoints, then you want to make sure that each of those teams has those multiple viewpoints and the knowledge and skills. I won't be talking much more about forming teams, but I do want to show you this. This is in your workbook. What are different effective ways to form teams? This is actually from the Faculty Guide to Teamwork website. There's more information than this, but it will basically go through the pros and the cons of different ways to form teams. So, for instance, assigning them randomly, letting students pick their own, letting students pick their own based on topic, etc. So if you want to learn more about this, just check out facultyguidetoteamwork.com and you'll get more information about it. And if we have more time at the end of the webinar, we can discuss this a little more. So let's keep going. And the next question that I'm going to talk about is, how do I support student teams to ensure their success? And to support teams, the students should be provided with motivation, structure, time, and skill development training. And all of these items were mentioned as challenges by somebody in our introductory poll question. So what do I mean by this? Well, let's start with motivation. So you really need to sell your project. To motivate them, sell them on the idea. Tell students what's in it for them if they complete this project. Tell them specifically why the project is important for your course. So for instance, you could say, this project will help you meet 3 of the learning outcomes of this course, or this project will help you use and understand information in this course that you might be tested on. Also tell students why teamwork is important for them academically and or professionally. And I heard a few of you who shared with us about your projects saying something to the effect of, it prepares students for the real world. It prepares students for the working world. And finally, tell them that you're going to support them. And tell them that support will be there throughout the assignment. So they won't feel like this assignment was dropped in our lap and now we're on our own. So motivate students. We recommend actually putting something in your syllabus that gives the reasoning and motivation for using team projects. Sometimes when students hear there's a team project, they are not happy about it. And so if you put it right in your syllabus at the beginning of the semester, that can help motivate them. What you see on the screen right now is a screenshot from the website, Faculty Guide to Teamwork. And this is just a sample syllabus statement that somebody put in their syllabus to help motivate students for working on their project. And that's something you might want to take a look at later to see if there's something similar that you could put in your syllabus. So now let's do another activity. I'd really like to hear from you. For this activity, you will be entering your responses in the chat window. So just the normal chat window that you have been typing in all along. And here's the activity. So think about the project that you came up with when we were talking about this at the beginning of the presentation. What is the benefit to your students for working on that particular team project? So what I'm looking for is really, what's in it for the students? What do students get out of doing your project? So take a minute to think about this. You might want to jot something down in your workbook. And when you're ready, just type your response in the chat window and share with everybody, and we'll start to see what's in it for students with your projects. While you are doing this activity, I just want to remind you that all of the chat entries will be captured and saved for all of you to see when we send out the recording after this webinar is over. All right. So from James, we have the advantage to them, to the students for working on his project, as they learn to work collaboratively. Collaboration occurs throughout your life in jobs across disciplines. So that's an excellent way to motivate them, telling them in the real world they're going to have to collaborate. And actually, collaboration is a skill, and they will be practicing that skill and gaining experience in it. So that would be motivating to me. What else? What other benefits are in it for you? While I'm waiting for you to type in, I teach a class called Pharmacology of the Synapse. And in this class, I have student teams do a 5-minute video presentation of a primary journal article. Something, they get to choose the article. And what I tell them is that, so this is a class for majors or juniors or seniors, is that if they haven't run into this already, they will definitely need to develop the skills to read primary literature, read the research. And this project will help them develop those skills in a way that is supported going forward. So Marilyn says, because students present project summaries to me and to the partner community, it's a practice talking to a larger, more experienced individuals, which is a great skill for students to develop. In other words, they are not talking to their peers, they are talking to outside community members. Amy has said that it's an advantage for students because they get to know their peers better. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, this is a real advantage for big classes because students may not get to know people otherwise unless they're put in a team. And a lot of times these teams for projects like this remain friends even after the course is over. So what students get out of it? Ability to be creative, ability to dig deeper into that week's topic. So yep, they're going beyond just what's assigned to them. They can go into it more deeply. Let's see, from Sarah, skill set slightly outside of the norm, more future-based for where healthcare practice is going rather than the minimum of current expectations. This gives them a self-marketing tool when seeking a job and an additional skill set on the job that can evaluate their contributions. I'm really glad you shared that with the group. One of the projects I mentioned in the beginning, the one about the community web design project, is one of the advantages of that project is that students can use their experience working on that project on their resumes or CVs and have actually helped some of the students in that class get internships because they did have experience working with an outside client. Experiencing, Blaine says, they're experiencing collective intelligence to generate novel solutions to complex problems. And that's a really good thing for students to experience for themselves. A lot of times students would prefer to work on a project by themselves, right? Because they're in control, they don't have to worry about anyone slacking. But if they get that experience of how the ideas are so much better from a team, from these multiple perspectives, that might change their attitude about working in teams. Okay, I'm just going to talk about one more. The members in a group usually come from different majors with different backgrounds. Yes, this diversity will bring different angles to think on the same question. And that is an advantage for having a heterogeneous class, so the students aren't all from the same majors. So thank you all for typing in those advantages. If you are teaching and if you are actually using these projects in your teaching, I suggest that you share what you've typed here with your students. Consider putting a sentence in the syllabus about what they're going to get out of it, or mention something on the first day of class, the benefits of this team project. And you may want to also bring this up towards the middle of the semester when things start to get busy and students are stressed out. So thank you for responding to that. I'm going to continue on. So we're still talking about supporting students. We just got finished talking about providing motivation. Another thing you can do is provide structure for the teams. You can scaffold the project. And we heard that already from one of the participants who says that she breaks the team project up into smaller pieces and grades those pieces over time. So not only does that prevent students from procrastinating, waiting till the night before, but it also divides up the grading for you across the semester, so you don't have a ton of grading at the end of the semester with all those projects. Plus, if student teams are going off track, you can catch it soon enough to help them get back on track. So, for instance, if they're going to do a poster or do some type of paper, the first assignment might be to choose the topic. The next assignment might be to choose their resources. A next assignment might be to turn in a draft. And another advantage of this scaffolding is that when they receive feedback on all of these steps, you will actually get a better product at the end. And it's easier to grade a good product than it is to grade a bad product. Okay, so provide structure for students. Provide students with in-class time to work. When we were putting together our faculty teamwork site, actually, no, it was for the student teamwork site. We also have a student teamwork site, and the link is in the slides. We did some focus groups with University of Minnesota undergraduate students, and we asked them what they liked and what they didn't like about team projects. The number one thing that students said they didn't like was having to match up their schedules and figure out a way to work together out of class. So they're busy, they have jobs, they may have families, they have other things, and think of it, if it's an 8-person team or a 9-person team, it would be really difficult for them to meet outside of class. So I highly recommend that you provide students with in-class time, if you teach a face-to-face class, to do some of that work in class. Now, ideally, the time you give them in class, you will actually give them a task to complete, and that task would be a necessary step for them to move forward on their project. And even if it's just a little bit of time, it at least allows them to discuss.
Question about recommendations for online.
Yeah, recommendations for online classes. Well, one of the advantages of online classes is that they can collaborate electronically, or you could have teams connect synchronously. I've taken online workshops where we've had to synchronously meet together with the team, and that might be one way to get them together. And another suggestion I would have would be to provide them with some type of platform for that collaboration, some type of form of communication and keeping their data together so that they can go in and interact there. And in fact, some instructors will actually monitor those rooms and just see how the interaction is going. It gives them an idea of who's contributing in the teams and who aren't maybe not contributing to the teams. So the instructor could send a quick email. Hey, I saw you haven't talked much in your team. All right, moving on. Provide students with instruction on teamwork skills. Don't assume that students already know how to work in teams when they come to your class. They may not have the skills needed to work in teams. And one of the things you could tell them is that it's normal for teams to have conflict and that they're going to want to maybe talk about ways to deal with that conflict before it arises. And one way to do that is to have your student teams devise a policy statement. So a policy statement would simply be a document that outlines how the team is going to work together. So they all get together and say, how are we going to make decisions? Is it unanimous? Is it majority rules? And this slide here shows an example of a policy statement that you can find on the Faculty Guide to Teamwork website. And this can be modified for whatever your class is. I would suggest if you have students do a policy statement, have them do it very early in the semester, even before they start working on their team project. You might want to consider having students assign roles. So for instance, a facilitator, a recorder, a presenter, and that will help students focus on that role during the meeting. You could also have those roles rotate so students would have the experience of taking on additional roles. We talk more about roles on Faculty Guide to Team Projects. In fact, there's a video that's on the website where U of M instructor Barry Jensen tells us about how he uses teams in his teaching and why he uses teams in his teaching. So more information there. You may want to have students do an informal assessment of their own team. In other words, have students grade their team. And they could do an informal, formative team assessment in class. What you see here is a document you can find on Faculty Guide to Teamwork at umn.edu that basically is a list of questions sort of asking about the health or taking the pulse of the team. Do we arrive on time to meetings? Do we come prepared for meetings? Each team member can fill this out, and then they can discuss together what different people said, and then they can make changes based on things they need to improve on, and also talk about their strengths and make sure they keep doing them. So that's it for supporting teams. Now I'm going to talk about assessing team projects. Basically, the take-home message of this whole section about assessing team projects is that you should assess both the team and individual performance, right? So students, the team you want to assess so that students know it's sink or swim, right? We're all in this together. So if I don't contribute to this team project, that bad grade will affect me. And individual performance you want to assess because you could have team members who aren't doing any of the work. They're maybe slackers, and the rest of the team is doing all the work. There's a good grade on the project, but you don't know if those individuals really understand and can use the material. So this is a table taken from the Faculty Guide to Teamwork website with just some suggestions that you might want to implement for both team assessments and individual assessments. So for team assessments, give them a grade for the finished project. Give them collaborative exams. And if you go to the website, you will hear Al Bites, who is our director, talk about how he gives collaborative exams to his veterinary students. Team quizzes also are ways to assess teams. Individual assessments could be the typical assessments that you would use without teams. So like an individual writing assignment, but the assignment could be about summarizing the project. Individual exams, individual quizzes, and you could have students do peer review of their teammates so that there is some feedback they can give on how their teammates participated. So peer review allows students to evaluate each other as teammates. And this does give students a voice in how the different members participated. On Faculty Guide to Teamwork, we have some examples of peer review worksheets that you might want to consider using for your students doing peer review in your courses. You can modify these to make them fit your course. You can use them as they are. So that would get you started if you want to do peer review in your courses. What typically people do is they will have a final grade for a project. And that final grade will be based on two parts. One part will be the project grade, and that would be the grade assigned by you, the instructor, and that's just the quality of the product that they've turned out. The other grade would be that each team member gets a different score, and that would be based on peer review. So their final grade would be a combination of that project grade and their peer review score. Most instructors who do this usually make that peer review score a small percentage, 20%, 10% of the final grade. And that's something that when I talk to instructors, they tinker with a lot to get that balance just right between the peer review and the project grade. Now, if you are going to have students doing peer review that could actually affect their grade, it's really important for them to do some practice. So I would suggest having them do a formative peer review in the middle of the semester. And this formative peer review would be the same form that you're going to use for the peer review at the end of the semester, only it doesn't count. So students would fill it out. All the comments would be there. They could see the comments that their classmates made about them and get some practice in filling out these forms. The added benefit is that if there are students who maybe are having problems, peers don't think they're doing enough work, they're going to get that information with enough time to change and maybe start doing more work. So if you do a peer review, I would strongly recommend doing a practice peer review in class. So we've gone over a lot of information. The last thing that I suggest you do is once the semester's over, your project's over, collect some feedback on the project. And you could just add a question to your regular end of semester evaluations, asking students what worked well about the project, what didn't work well. Spend some time reflecting on it while it's still fresh in your mind and make changes. Make some changes to the project for the next time you teach it. So I like to think of these projects as sort of a living, evolving thing that the more you do it, the better it will get because you're getting that feedback from your students. So that should bring us to our summary. And I'm hoping that you are leaving with these main points. I'm hoping that you are going to design an authentic task that requires both collaboration and distinct individual contributions. So design an effective project to begin with. Then support your students by providing them motivation to do the project, structure, breaking that project up into pieces, time to work in class or a platform to work online, and skill development training. And finally, assess both the team and the individual performance. So we have time for some questions. In summary, though, I just want to remind you that you will receive a recording of this presentation. You will receive all of the the information that was in the chat window. We also would really like your feedback about this workshop. When you exit from this WebEx webinar, the feedback form will automatically pop up. So if you could take a minute to fill it out, it's very brief. This would help us to make sure that we're creating webinars that are useful for you. So with the remaining 4 minutes, what questions do you have? You can type those questions in the chat, or if you would like to raise your hand and ask them verbally, I will look for your hand raising. So to raise your hand, just click the little icon that looks like a hand at the bottom of your screen. Or just type your question into the chat.
And you can ask people who had their hands raised before to take their hands down if they have any questions.
Oh, good point. For those of you that had your hands raised before, you can take them down now.
So new hands.
And again, we're going to send you this follow-up information. We recommend you go to Faculty Guide to Teamwork. There's a lot more resources on that site than we had time to talk about today. And you will also see in your workbook the resources, all the resources that were used for putting together this presentation. And if I were to recommend only one article for you to read, it would be the Oakley article called Turning Student Groups into Effective Teams by Barbara Oakley, Richard Felder, et al. And it is listed on this list of resources. It's a great resource. Questions? If you think of questions after this presentation is over, you can send them directly to me, Christina Peterson. My email address is pete6647@umn.edu, pete6647. I will collect these questions and answer them and provide them in the email that we send out to everybody.
Marilyn.
I will not talk to them individually about conflict, so no one shares with me, but that's not a great solution.
So we have a question about conflict. That is a great question. I'm glad somebody asked about it. We also have a companion site called teamwork.umn.edu that's specifically designed for students. And this companion site has quite a bit of information on how to handle team conflict. There are actually video scenarios that show students handling the conflicts. I will say that instructors who use teamwork frequently in their teaching sometimes have this ability for teams to fire one of their team members if they're not participating. Michelle Dreesen, who's an instructor in chemistry, uses this. And so first, they have to give the team member a warning. And then if the team member doesn't respond to the warning, then they all have to meet with the instructor. And she said in all her years of teaching and the thousands of students she's taught, it only came down to 2 times where she had to meet with the teams. And in both cases, they worked it out at the meeting. So maybe just having that as an option would be useful. All right, so it's 9:01. Thank you, everybody, for attending, especially early on a Monday morning. You will receive follow-up from us, slides, and more information. And thank you for being here. And again, if you could take time to fill out the evaluation, that would be great.